Good evening. This is Maestro Cortello with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Leviathan Hive, a map you don't see that much anymore. Our first player is Texcalibur, the famous Sword of Legend, playing as this Ravener Alpha who just came out through one of his tunnels. He is a tunneling commander. He can be pretty good both in ranged combat and in melee combat. But his greatest asset is probably those tunnels that you just saw him make and come out of. Gives Tyranids a lot of mobility. They're basically like free webway gates, although they don't cost red, but they're much more easily destroyed and they are not cloaked. Still, gives Tyranids a lot of mobility. On the other side of things, we have Stoned Elf. The long form of his name is Stoned Elf Boy. He is playing as this Commissar Lord. The Commissar Lord is a slightly tanky melee hero, sometimes considered more of a support hero. He has a free energy shield that you can see is active right now. Mainly fights in melee and can still get some pretty powerful melee weapons. Now, this is a matchup I'm not terribly familiar with, but Tex is playing as this Ravener Alpha. He actually goes for a double Hormigaunt opening instead of a double Termagant opening. It's an interesting choice. I don't think he'll be able to put as much pressure on the Sentinels with double Hormigaunts as opposed to double Termagants, and especially considering that Stoned Elf Boy has 2 Sentinels. But on the other hand, one of the Commissar's greatest assets is his Flare Global. Often prevents since it reduces range. It's often an engagement winner whenever you're focusing or relying primarily on a ranged composition. So a double Termagant build might have a lot of trouble dealing with those Commissar flares. And then, yet again, on the other hand, the Ravener starts out primarily as a ranged hero. So he doesn't really... the double Termagant build complements the Hive Tyrant and the Lictor Alpha a lot better than it does the Ravener Alpha, since those heroes have no range DPS whatsoever, whereas the Ravener Alpha starts out primarily as a ranged hero. And then, on the other hand, the Ravener Alpha is the least effective in melee, so the double Hormigaunt build will actually probably complement him a little better than it would the other heroes. So this double Sentinel build, I've been playing Imperial Guard. I've actually been, at this point, experimenting with all Imperial Guard heroes. The double Sentinel build is very, very powerful. What works about the Sentinel is that it's very bleed resistant. The Sentinels themselves do not take any bleed unless you lose it entirely. And just the basic way it works is that you have them up front. Once they start taking damage, they won't bleed just from taking damage. And once they start taking damage, you have your Guardsmen retreat. You back the Sentinels off of it. See, right here, this is a horribly losing engagement for the Termagants. They will just bleed models, and Stoned Elf Boy will not suffer any losses whatsoever. And these Termagants, only one squad of Termagants cannot stand up at all against 2 Sentinels. A double Termagant build might do fairly well against a single Sentinel, but definitely not against double Sentinels. Now we see that Stoned Elf Boy he only got the ground pound on one of his Sentinels. And he probably did that just because getting a second ground pound might not entirely be necessary. He does have to deal with 3 different melee units now, so that might prompt him to get the ground pound on his second Sentinel as well, since there's a lot more risk of getting swarmed when there are 3 melee units. Usually a stomp is good for 1 melee unit, unless you have a player who's going to just run more than 1 melee unit into a Sentinel. And Tex, as a good player, will probably not do that. It is still very interesting to see him go for very melee-intensive builds against Imperial Guard, which typically is one of the best races for countering melee, in part because they don't have much melee themselves. So Stoned Elf Boy, now he's going to decap Tex's natural. And Stoned Elf Boy with a very... well, not a very large power farm. But this map is unique in that it has 2 very natural power farms. And you can kind of choose which one you want to use. Usually the ones on the southern side seem a little bit better to me, but they're still both very natural. The Ravener Alpha has been upgraded to the Hardened Carapace, allows him to burrow much like a Zerg unit, and he is infiltrated like this. Stoned Elf Boy does not yet have a detector. Actually, he does right here, and this Catachan Devils have already been upgraded to have their Demo Man, so they will be able to put down improvised explosives, as well as just having an 8th member. So this Sentinel right here is now being swarmed by melee units, and it does not have the ground pound. Tex, on the other hand, meanwhile, he's gone for a very long tier 1, and now he does actually have double Termagants as well as double Hormagaunts. So the issue of what complementing is not really an argument anymore. He just has a lot of stuff, period. He's very much covered all of the bases. Obviously, these are very long tier 1 builds. I've seen this a bit from better players more than mid to low level players, that sometimes they will actually make a lot of units and actually delay their power farm and just have and get a long tier 1. As it is, we see both players with 5 units in addition to their heroes. We also see minimal war gear, only the enhanced muscle coil, or I'm not the hardened carapace on the Ravener Alpha, nothing on the Commissar Lord. And then minimal upgrades, again, the Stone Delphoi only choosing to get that ground pound on one of his Sentinels, and he does also get the Demo Man on his Catachan Devil. So he's only spent power in those 2 places. Tex has spent his power on crippling Toxin Sacks, the Hardened Carapace, and the Warrior. So he spent a little bit more power, despite having less of a power income and less of a power farm. He finally does drop a little bit of a power farm right here, but I am a little concerned with these Catachan Devils, which are planning improvised explosives. They will at least get this node down. I wonder if Stone Elfboy will go for the decap. He certainly still has plenty of time to destroy some of these Tyrannid generators as well. Tex, meanwhile, being a little sneaky, is actually backcapping one of Stone Elfboy's natural powers as well as the natural victory point. Yeah, it looks like Stone Delphoi just going for more of a power bash right here. Now, I totally missed something, unfortunately. I missed Tex losing a Hormagaun Brood, as well as Stone Delphoi losing a Guardsman Squad. And we are just catching Stone Delphoi destroying these generators. We now have Barbed Strangler Warriors. I think that's a very good choice. It will suppress. It's a suppression. It's basically a grenade launcher that suppresses, and it's pretty good against Imperial Guard. That shot is usually pretty good against those Guardsmen, or as well as the Catachan Devils. I think that was a nice shot. You saw the chunk it took out. It does pretty nice burst damage. Not quite as good against other races, power armor races. Better against the squishier races. And now, since Tex has detected this improvised explosive, I would think he would want to... Oh, man. I was going to say, I would think he would want to destroy it, and for not destroying it, he actually loses a Termagant squad. So Tex is now starting Tier 2 when Stone Delphoi has already been in there and is floating quite a bit, actually. Does now go for some Stormtroopers. Now, Stormtroopers are a pretty safe choice for Tyranids, for Imperial Guard overall in most matchups. They start out just being a good anti-infantry unit, having a high range DPS, 12 per model to start out, coming out to 60. And you can leave them in their vanilla form, and they will perform adequately. And you can decide later on, based on what you see, whether or not you want to invest in either the anti-armor kit or the assault kit. The assault kit is, of course, an anti-infantry specialization, while the anti-armor kit is an anti-armor specialization. But you can just leave them vanilla to start out, and they will perform very well. Let's see if Stone Delphoi has even upgraded them. He already has the assault kit. Now, that's a much safer choice against Tyranids than it is against other races, since Tyranids have no vehicle in Tier 2. They have that Tyrant Guard, which some people... It is kind of like a vehicle in some ways, but it's not. It doesn't have vehicle armor. It has super heavy infantry armor, and you don't need hard AV for that, or you don't need AV period for that. Catachan Devils getting very low on health, start losing 2 models. Now, Catachan Devils are interesting in the way their squad leaders share damage. They basically don't start losing health until... they basically don't start losing any models until most of the squad is already dead. This could be a dead warrior brood for Tex. Those Stormtroopers just need to open fire. They were suppressed, though. And yes, they do have a very long grenade throw range, apparently. Because Tex was kind of just took it. I guess he thought that since they were suppressed, they would not be able to throw a grenade in range. And there he lost 2 models on off this Warrior Brood. These Stormtroopers can also... The Assault Kit increases their damage. Comes out to, I believe, 15 per model, so 75 DPS total. Gives them the grenade, which is new in the Elite mod, that was not in retail. And it also increases their range, so they can gen bash from long range. Do need to be very careful about this Ravener Alpha, though. Now has the Corrosive Devourer. This is a plasma weapon, so it will actually reduce the damage the Ravener Alpha does to the Guardsmen, the Catachans, and the Stormtroopers. Or at least it will have a damage penalty. I don't know if I don't remember what the Ravener Alpha's starting DPS is, so I don't know if it's still a net increase over his starting DPS against regular infantry armor. But the main thing that it's going to be really good for are those Sentinels. And it's worth it to deal with those Sentinels, especially since both of Stoned Elfboy's Sentinels are still up. They're very annoying. The Sentinel is a very interesting unit. It's a core Imperial Guard unit. You will hardly ever see Imperial Guard players not get at least one of them in Tier 1. Not that it's impossible to do, but it's just such a good unit in so many ways, so core to the way the Imperial Guard plays that you will hardly ever not see it. It's also a unit that often dies in Tier 2, and usually it's actually somewhat expected to die, and it's really not that big of a deal if it does. And despite the fact that it's not that big of a deal if it does, it's actually still very nice to keep your Sentinel alive if you can. And Stoned Elfboy right now is keeping 2 alive. It looks like he might lose this one, though. No, he gets very close. He does manage to force off those Tyranids. Actually, oh, wow. If that Ravener Alpha, I think, had just stayed in there just a little bit longer, I think he would have taken out that Sentinel. But that Ravener Alpha with the Corrosive Devourer, he will have a bonus against heavy infantry now, so he will have to be doing bonus damage against the Sentinels instead of having a penalty with his default weapon. And he might take out this a little risky from Tex now, keeping that Ravener Alpha as long as he is. There have been some additional war gear upgrades. We have the Commissar now only with Stubbornness, no weapon, no armor, Stubbornness. So right now, I think Stoned Elfboy, without a weapon upgrade, the offensive power of the Commissar is not really that great. He does get, certainly with any of his weapons, those will improve his offensive power by a lot. The Power Sword, probably not that great of a choice in this matchup, unless you really want it for dealing with those Warrior Broods. And an armor upgrade is also pretty nice for the Commissar, usually for either Inspire Determination or Inspire Terror, but he doesn't have one of those either. Stubbornness is actually just going to keep him alive as long as he stays bunched up with his units. Now, Stoned Elfboy has actually been in Tier 3 for a while now, got to Tier 3 very early. His only Tier 2 purchase was the Stormtrooper Squad, which is actually a relatively minimal investment, considering they cost no power to field at first, and then the Assault Kit, I believe, is only 75 requisition. It's the Anti-Armor Kit that costs some power. I mean, look at how oppressive Stoned Elfboy is being, going for decaps with his Sentinels, both on the natural VP of Tex, as well as even this so natural requisition. Tex, meanwhile, really getting in behind here, and Tex, he's got double Tyrant Guards and he's going for a third. So I wasn't commenting on that just yet. But these Tyrant Guards, there have been a lot of things said about them. They have super heavy infantry armor in Tier 2. Since they only have super heavy infantry armor instead of vehicle armor, you really don't need to worry that much about... basically, Tyranids can't really have that threat of fielding a Tier 2 vehicle. They can't early vehicle rush, because an early Tyrant Guard is just not really the same, because it will still take pretty significant damage. Well, not significant. It will still take some damage from regular piercing weapons, and with super heavy infantry armor, it's actually going to be having... it will actually be taking bonus damage from all of the plasma weapons that you can get in Tier 2. Both Sentinels now have the ground pound. both sticking just with their... Oh, just kidding. This one's getting the missile launcher. The other one is not. And Tex actually now with a double cap. Improvised explosives go off right there. These double tyrant guards. Tex also going for a zoanthrope. He must have... He apparently lost both of his Hormagaunts. And this Leman Russ is now out for Stoned Elf Boy. Haven't not seen it do anything, but it does have the elite tank crew. It does not have a weapon upgrade yet. It still has that little cannon. The longer cannon is the Vanquisher. Sometimes hard to tell the difference, but the Vanquisher is a bit longer. And that Leman Russ, I think in any form with any cannon, will counter these Tyrant Guards basically. But he does have to be careful with a Zoanthrope now on the field. Ken used its focused Warp Blast Zoanthrope. I clicked on the Zoanthrope to snare the Leman Russ. Can also snare the Sentinels, though that might not be quite as good of a use of it. But these missile launchers, we now finally have missile launchers upgraded into Tier 3. Both Sentinels, one's at level 3, the other's at level 2. The missile launchers are a pretty good choice at this point, I think. Specifically, the Sentinels don't really have great DPS to start out. And the Tyrant Guards will be resisting a lot of their piercing damage from those starting multi-lasers. Now, the missile launchers don't actually... They're not really a high damage thing. But they will at least... The Tyrant Guards will not resist the damage. Those missiles will be doing full damage to the Tyrant Guards. At least the crack missiles will. And what Stoned Elf Boy is doing, he actually has one Sentinel firing crack missiles, the other one firing frag missiles. So the one that's firing frag missiles will be able to threaten the Termagants as well as the Warriors, whereas the one firing the crack missiles will be able to threaten the Tyrant Guards. The Tyrant Guard is trying to rush into that Leman Russ, and now we also have the Melta, so plenty of responses by Stoned Elf Boy on these Tyrant Guards. He's keeping them in there, though. One is in shield wall. I wonder if he'll put the other one in as well. And these double Zoanthropes, they could certainly threaten those Catachan Devils if they can just get 2 blasts on the Catachan Devils. And we have that Ravener Alpha coming in from behind. Now has the Strengthened Sinew, increasing his speed by 1.5. And now we finally have a weapon upgrade on the Commissar. And I'm actually really surprised to see Stoned Elf Boy go for the Power Fist and not the Fist of Brachus. Now, I actually think the Power Fist is a good choice for the Commissar. Mainly because of the convenience factor that you can get it in Tier 2. Stoned Elf Boy is already in Tier 3. He got that as in Tier 3. Could have gotten the Fist of Brachus. I believe it costs more, but I think it would at least be the better choice now that Stoned Elf Boy is already in Tier 3. He decides not to get it, though. Very even VPs, 287 to 284. Zoanthropes are backing off, and let's see. This Tyrant Guard gets out of there, but I think this one is probably done. It's staying in shield wall, restoring its health, but now it's getting hit by multiple sources of AV. Now, the Tyrant Guard does have vehicle armor when it's in shield wall mode, and it will also be restoring health. But I think, yeah, Stoned Elf Boy has too much AV. He had double Sentinel missile launchers as well as that Leman Russ. I think it now... I'm trying to take a look. No, it still does not have the Vanquisher cannon. That's still just the default battle cannon on the Leman Russ. And now a third Zoanthrope from Texcalibur. I feel like I haven't seen a lot out of these Zoanthropes. And I'm also questioning... I mean, they will be very good against the Catachan Devils. They will also be very good against the Guardsmen as well as the Stormtroopers. Now, Stoned Elf Boy, he's running around with his Stormtroopers infiltrated, actually going for a decap on this requisition. And now he has to watch out for triple Zoanthropes. That could be an instant wipe on the Stormtroopers. Alright, so Stoned Elf Boy does have some time to respond. Tex actually attacked ground there with his Zoanthropes because he knew the Stormtroopers were there, even though they were infiltrated, and he did not have a detector ready. And he actually brought those Stormtroopers down to half health. They have... Oh my god, they're going to get wiped. And no model losses despite being at 52 health. We have some Warrior Brews just idling here, unfortunately. They could have gotten a cap there. That could have made it a... that could have turned it into a double cap for Tex. As it is, these Warrior Broods do not stand a chance against the Commissar. So, triple Zoanthropes, especially bunched up, will be very good against the Commissar. Oh, that Warrior Brood, I think it would... No, it will not get out of there. Not with Catachandels that could force melee. They could do whatever they want, pretty much. Hopefully we'll at least see... Oh, man, Stoned Elf Boy not really paying attention. And he misses the opportunity to wipe that Warrior Brood. He had so many things he could have done there. He could have force melee'd with the Catachands and set off this improvised explosive. That would have been a dead... not a dead Warrior Brood. Stoned Elf Boy, meanwhile, he lost one of his Sentinels. Quite sad, but it does get, again, it gets a lot harder to keep a Sentinel alive this late into the game. And I think the Zoanthropes are actually going to be very good at countering the Sentinels. They can use their Focused Warp Blast on the Sentinel, and then their regular attack does psychic damage, which is not very good against vehicles, or it's not very good against vehicle armor. But the Sentinel has heavy infantry armor, and the psychic damage from the Zoanthropes either does full damage to heavy infantry armor, or it does bonus damage. I think this Leman Russ will be just fine. The Corrosive Devourer also has an ability that allows it to do decent AV damage, but I don't think it's going to be enough to take out this Leman Russ. Now have Castricans out for Stoned Elf Boy. No upgrades whatsoever yet, so they're just with their regular Hell Guns. I don't know if they need a... Well, actually they could use a Plasma upgrade to deal with this Tyrant Guard. Could alternately go for a Melta upgrade, which would also work. They should at least get their weapon expertise, and Stoned Elf Boy's floating a lot of resources. He might be going for a Bane Blade. One Zoanthrope gets very close to dying, so does this Catachan Devil Squad, but again, the way they share damage with their squad leaders, they're only at 300 health out of 1,371, and yet all 9 members of the squad are still alive. So they do get forced off the field, but they actually take no bleed whatsoever. Now, Stoned Elf Boy still running around with no armor upgrade. And there are a few choices he could get there. When he was chasing down that Warrior Brood, if he had Inspire Terror, he could have sniped that last model. And Inspire Terror would also be very, very good against the Zoanthropes. That can be very threatening to a Zoanthrope, especially if they try to retreat with partial health. Inspire Terror is would pretty much result in the kill. These Warrior Broods going to go down now, and I think Tex just not paying attention there. Probably just had his attention elsewhere. And Tex now down to only 4 units, has none of his starting tier 1 units, and he lost 2 of his Zoanthropes. No. Oh, I don't know. Something happened. He has all 3 of his Zoanthropes still. It said he had 3 Tyrant Guards. He has 1 Tyrant Guard. He's getting a new Warrior Brood. And Stoned Elf Boy is obviously saving up for a Bane Blade at this point. Now, you generally don't see the Bane Blade a whole lot, I think, in 1v1s. The Leman Russ is a really solid tank, and I think it might actually be better to get 2 Leman Russes over a Bane Blade. Ravner Alpha going to go down. But certainly a Leman Russ and a Bane Blade is going to be a really tough combination to deal with, I think. Alright, so Stoned Elf Boy has a single cap. We'll get a double cap, but he can't really get a unit to go up to this victory point because there are 3 Zoanthropes. The Castricans are also going to be pretty good, as well as the Stormtroopers will be pretty good for dealing with the Zoanthropes. They will just do so much damage in a single burst that they can really threaten to wipe the Zoanthropes if Tex is not being careful enough. So Tex is struggling a bit. He's lost more units. He does not have the map control right now. The time is ticking. And Stoned Elf Boy now has the resources to go for a Bane Blade. Tex does not have anything. He's struggling much more in resources on the other hand. We have not seen any of the tier 3 spam that you can sometimes expect to see out of Tyranid players. And these Zoanthropes, unfortunately, really just doing almost nothing to this Leman Russ. That psychic damage just has a pretty significant penalty, is not a significant source of it. It's not really AV, basically. We have a new warrior brood. This one is an adrenal gland warrior, and it is getting a cap on the middle VP, while Stone Delphoy is kind of just camping out this one right here. Tex will need to dislodge this Leman Russ and these units somehow, but this is just a hard wall, I think, for Tex to break right now. And he doesn't really have the right stuff, because... Oh, but he is taking out those guardsmen. Those guardsmen need to retreat. So do these Kashkins. Those Zoanthropes, as good as they are against the infantry, they are absolutely destroying the infantry, but they cannot take out these vehicles. Maybe the Sentinel, especially if they use Focused Warp Blast. We should see, hopefully, yes, we'll see it right now, and that should be the end of that Sentinel. Alright, so a good push by Tex this time, but he really does not have enough to deal with this Leman Russ, I think. He's basically going to be relying, he uses 2 Focused Warp Blasts, so that Leman Russ is double snared, and it's now getting chased down by the Tyrant Guard. I don't know if that'll be enough to finish off the Leman Russ. It is no longer snared, and one of these Zoanthropes will probably go down. Oh! So I think the cooldown for that 3rd Zoanthrope, its Focused Warp Blast went off cooldown, so I think it was just barely able to get that Focused Warp Blast off to finish off the Leman Russ. Now, the Focused Warp Blast for the Zoanthropes actually does do AV damage, but it's an ability AV damage, so it's a single use, and then you won't be able to use it for as long as it's on cooldown. Now, Tex is in a tricky situation where part of the issue is that he doesn't. He would need to cap with Zoanthropes at this point, because he doesn't have many other units to capture with. And Zoanthrope's usually not a prime unit for capturing, but that's what Tex has. And now Tex is saving up, so I think we can expect to see some kind of super unit for him. Looks like he might be going for the Swarm Lord instead of Carnifex, but I think he has neither. He doesn't really have the power for either, I think. And now we do have that Flak Jacket that will probably help Stone Delphoy to destroy or kill some of those Zoanthropes. All 3 are still alive. And now a Baneblade. Tex does not really have enough to deal with this Baneblade. I don't entirely know what he's going to do about that. So that Baneblade is a tough nut to crack. Stone Delphoy has lost both of his Sentinels as well as his Leman Russ. Baneblade, 3,500 health. Now, there have been some people who have been saying just something about the way the Baneblade has been changed in the Elite mod. It's no longer... Demolisher Cannon shot right into the cliff. Its main cannon no longer is an ability. It's been changed to fire automatically. It does less damage per shot, but the overall damage coming out of the Baneblade, the DPS of the Baneblade, is actually quite a bit higher than it was in retail. So one of the reasons it was changed, that ability was changed so that it wouldn't one-shot units like Fire Prism, so it wouldn't get a rear armor hit on a Fire Prism and just one-shot it. Or even just a tank is fleeing, and it still has 400 health, and then the ability from that Baneblade just finishes it off. I guess the burst damage may have just been considered too high, and the effect of that on tanks was a little ridiculous. That being said, it's still going to straight up beat any other tank in the game. In part because it's actually doing quite a bit higher DPS now. And some of the old strategies for dealing with the Baneblade using tanks actually no longer work. I actually saw a replay a long time ago where a player was able to threaten a Baneblade with Fire Prisms by basically just being very conscious of when the Baneblade's cannons were on cooldown, as well as keeping the Fire Prisms at maximum range. Now we have Thornback Carnifex. I'd say a Thornback Carnifex is a counter for a Baneblade, but it's unsupported right now, and we do have some other sources of AV, mainly this Commissar. And now I think those Zoanthropes, if they can just get some shots on that Kashkin squad, they might wipe it. And I think we might want to see some Focused Warp Blast to snare that Baneblade in place, but it does not happen. Now, some other things that have been changed about the Baneblade. Actually, let's take a look at this. I noticed what Stoned Elf Boy is doing. He's actually strategically using the infiltration that Catachans have. They will infiltrate once they have their veteran sergeant or whatever he's called. The Catachan Devils will actually infiltrate after they have been standing still for long enough. Now, I think for a lot of players, they just kind of take for granted that exists, and it's just something that they just see it whenever they're idling their Catachans, but they never actually use it. Stone Delph Boy is a very good Imperial Guard player and is apparently just really using everything that his race has. Because he's very dedicated to the Imperial Guard. I don't know if I've ever seen him play anything else. So he just really knows all the tricks. So he was parking, yeah, he's doing it right now, parking his Catachan Devils right next to the VP. And then any unit that will try to go around and capture that point while the Catachan Devils are there, most units that are going to go around are going to straight up lose to those Catachan Devils. Especially since there's also an improvised explosive here as well. And so even if he's facing some kind of unit that might actually have an advantage over his Catachans, he can soften them up with that improvised explosive and then just force melee them. So VP's getting very low for Tex, and he stopped capturing this point. He can't afford to do that. He does not have the time, and unfortunately I think that's going to cost him the game. He may have just given up. Yeah, I can only imagine he gave up at that point. He had his units right there. I think he could have at least gotten the decap off. But that is the end of the game. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.